On Christmas Eve, my mom kicked us out, saying no room. Now, Grandma called me back and did something that shook the whole family. "Go home. There's no room for you." She didn't whisper it. She didn't pull me aside. She said it loud, sharp, and ice cold, right in front of my 6-year-old son. That was my mother's welcome when we showed up for the family Christmas party 2 years ago. I stood there frozen. My son's smile faded, and we walked away humiliated. But the story didn't end there. My grandmother found out. She called me, demanded I come back. What happened after that flipped the entire family upside down and made my parents wish they'd never opened that door. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel. I am 35 years old and work as a branch manager for a company that specializes in auto rentals and used cars in Denver, Colorado. This isn't the work I envisioned as a child, but it provides me with a steady income and the freedom to care for my family members. I live with my wife, Sophie, and our 8-year-old son, Mason, in Thornton, a pleasant suburb about 10 minutes from the office. Every morning, I hear Mason giggling in the room next door. He is usually thrilled to tell me about his weird dreams. Sophie is generally busy in the kitchen preparing breakfast, occasionally reminding me not to forget my phone before I go. These simple moments remind me that true happiness does not need to be complicated. Still, there are times when I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, haunted by recollections of the Christmas party in 2023. Some nights, I sit up in bed, my shirt soaking, knowing deep down that I still can't get rid of the pictures of my parents and younger brother. My narrative begins on a weekend evening in December, only a few days before Christmas. Our family had just concluded a lovely dinner of grilled pork and mashed potatoes, Mason's favorite. While Sophie was cleaning the table and Mason was playing with his Legos in the living room, my phone rang. When the name Grandma Helen appeared on the screen, my heart warmed. I picked up straight away. She's the one person in my family who has ever actually loved me. My grandmother Helen is 78 years old but remains healthy and sharp. She was the only one in the family who ever stood up for me, especially because my parents were always favoring Nathan, my younger brother. After asking a few pleasant questions about Mason, she got to the point of her call. She informed me that this year's Christmas would be hosted at her large house in Boulder, and she hoped that my family would be present. The instant she uttered that, a calm fear crept into my heart. After more than a year of avoiding them, the notion of seeing my parents and Nathan again made my throat clench. Still, I didn't want to disappoint her, so I agreed. I answered her, "Yes, I'll bring Sophie and Mason." But when I hung up, my mind raced with 100 other ideas. I didn't want to upset her, but the thought of attending that party made me nervous. Sophie strolled in from the kitchen as I was still lost in contemplation after the phone talk with Grandma. She noticed the anxious look on my face and inquired, "What's wrong? You don't look okay." I pulled her into a chair and informed her of Grandma's invitation. Sophie looked at me, concerned, and asked, "Do you want to go? I know you don't feel comfortable seeing them again." I sighed deeply and replied, "I don't want to disappoint Grandma. She's the only family member who's ever truly loved me." Sophie gently placed her hand on me and squeezed lightly. She said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Hearing such remarks from her made me feel grateful and even blessed. I want a woman that understands me and constantly supports me. After nearly 2 minutes of silence, I informed her, "We'll go to Grandma's party. We can't keep running from this." And more importantly, she invited us. Just as I finished speaking, Mason, who was seated nearby, burst out in enthusiasm. He was covertly listening to everything while building his Legos. His delight reminded me of all the times he'd accompanied us on visits to my grandmother. Mason adored Grandma Helen, despite having only seen her a few times. He recommended we prepare a greeting card for her and even asked Sophie if she might bake something for her. Grandma had enjoyed one of Sophie's cakes when we visited approximately 3 months prior. Sophie had suggested Mason make cards for both of his grandparents. Mason refused. He stated, "Grandma and Grandpa don't like me. They only care about Adrian, so I'm not making them cards." Hearing those remarks from my son struck me deeply. I was not sad because he did not love my parents. I was upset because Adrian and Nathan threw a shade over my son, preventing him from experiencing their love. Adrian is the son of Nathan, my younger brother. Nathan had always been my parents' favorite child. When Adrian was born, he became the family's golden grandchild. Growing up with Nathan was unjust, all because he had a smoother mouth and was smarter than me. He was always able to win over adults. When I broke a glass, Mom scolded me and I remained mute. But when Nathan shattered a glass, he would rush to Mom and tell her, "Dear Mom, your sweet son accidentally broke the glass." She would hold him and say, "It's okay." During dinner, anytime our parents had something new, he would immediately throw in a few comments like, "Mom, your new hair looks beautiful," or "Dad, you're a hero in my heart." I couldn't say those things. He knew more than simply how to captivate our parents. He also knew how to charm people with lavish compliments. That's why my parents gradually began to favor him. I assumed their preference would end as we were older, married, and had children. But it did not. My parents definitely distinguished between Mason and Adrian. They favored Adrian far too much. My parents only paid Mason a brief visit after his birth, but when Adrian was born, they gave him $5,000 to cover diapers and formula. In addition, my mother spent several days at the hospital assisting Nathan's wife in caring for Adrian. She took pictures of Adrian and posted them on her personal Facebook as the children grew older, but she never mentioned Mason. When we had family meals together, the topic was always about Adrian. Then, over a year ago, we had a heated dispute on my father's birthday. After the party that day, my dad gave Adrian a gift, a plane ticket to Hawaii to accompany them. I questioned Mom about Mason's share. She said coldly, "Mason can go next time. If we ever make another trip, we'll bring him." After that, I stood up and complained about how unjust they were. Mom did not fight with me after I finished speakings. Instead, she added, "If you believe it is unfair, don't ever return to this house." Since then, I have stopped bringing my wife and Mason over. Return to the narrative of my grandmother's Christmas party. Mason spent a week before Christmas creating a lovely card to send to great-grandmother. The card was made of green paper that he cut into the shape of a Christmas tree. On the front, he created a small house with smoke curling from the chimney. Next to it sat an elderly lady with silver hair, smiling. Mason scribbled, "I love you, great-grandma, Merry Christmas," in unsteady red crayon letters near the base of the tree. He also affixed a small yellow star in the top right corner. Every night after supper, Mason would sit at the table and color the card. Every now and then, he'd ask me, "Dad, does this look good?" When I nodded and said yes, his face would brighten up like he'd been rewarded. On Christmas morning, Mason went into the kitchen to assist Sophie with baking. They worked and joked together. Sophie would occasionally playfully rub some frosting on his nose, and the two would laugh. Mason's grin with his frosting-covered nose made me smile. When he saw me smiling, he dashed over and hugged my leg, leaving a spot of frosting on my pants. Sophie apologized to me, but I shook my head and softly smoothed Mason's hair. Seeing the grins on my son's and wife's faces in that warm kitchen, with the lovely smell of baked goodies in the air, I hoped that this year's Christmas party would be memorable. And I honestly believed I was correct in accepting Grandma's invitation. At the time, I had no idea that just a few hours later, my mother, Carol, would deliver us a shock we would never forget for the rest of our lives. Around 4:00 p.m., our family departed Denver for Grandma's place in Boulder. We had planned to arrive around 5 p.m., but due to gridlock caused by an accident, we arrived about 6:30 p.m. Mason sat in the back seat repeatedly asking, "When will we get to your great-grandmother's house?" He clutched the card carefully, afraid it would get wrinkled. Sophie sat next to me, occasionally peering over with an anxious expression, fearing we were arriving too late. My gut constricted as our automobile turned onto the familiar route that leads to Grandma's house. The two-story white house with the red tile roof appeared, surrounded by enormous oak trees decorated with glittering Christmas lights. The driveway and curb in front of the house were jam-packed with cars. I spotted Nathan's blue Honda Civic and my parents' silver Camry among the others. There were a couple other cars that I didn't recognize, most likely from distant relatives. At that point, my heart began to beat weirdly and nervously. It had been over a year since I last returned home or attended a gathering at my parents' house, since the day they favored Adrian in front of Mason. After finding a parking spot at the end of the street, we approached Grandma's front door and rang the doorbell. Sophie stood by me carrying Mason, who was still holding the card and the box of cookies in his hands. I could hear laughter and talk from within, lovely Christmas music playing, and the aroma of great food wafting out. In less than a minute, the door opened slightly, revealing my mother, Carol, standing there. She was dressed in a red sweater with a reindeer motif, and her hair was nicely styled, nothing like the plain woman I knew. It was difficult to express how I felt at that time. Half of me was relieved to see my mother after more than a year apart, but another half was concerned about how she would react. When she saw us, she looked from me to Sophie and then to Mason, who was grinning. Her gaze was as cold as ice, unlike the warmth I had hoped for. Then, with the same chilly tone, she said, "Go home. There's no room left." I froze after hearing those words. My heart appeared to freeze for a second, and my mind spun, attempting to understand what had just occurred. Sophie stood behind me, stunned, her eyes wide with surprise. She reflexively tightened her hold on my hand. Mason was just over 6, but he understood what my mother had said. His smile faded slowly. His brilliant eyes became perplexed. He looked up at me, then at Sophie, perplexed about why we were being turned away. After a brief silence, I attempted to remain cool and told my mother, "Grandma invited us. There's no way there's no room." My mother responded quickly and dryly, "Helen told me if you showed up late, send you away." I stood there stunned, like if someone had squeezed the air straight out of my chest. She shut the door before I could say anything more, leaving my family alone. The cheery sounds of the party inside continued as if we hadn't been. Sophie gently stopped me as I grabbed for the doorbell once more, determined to learn the truth. I gazed at her. She shook her head, her eyes filled with sorrow, and quietly whispered, "Let's go. I don't want Mason to see any more of this." I gazed down at my son. Mason stood there, wide-eyed and puzzled, still clutching the card and the box of cookies. With trembling voice, he asked, "Dad, why didn't Grandma let us in? I made this card for my great-grandmother." Hearing that simple question devastated me. I had no idea how to convey adults' brutality to a 6-year-old. I quickly got Mason up, took Sophie's hand, and walked away from Grandma's house. When we went to the car and I opened the door for Mason, he started crying. Tears ran down his cheeks as he cried, "Dad, I just wanted to give my great-grandmother the card." My heart broke while watching him cry. I hugged him close, feeling absolutely powerless. Sophie sat alongside me, her eyes crimson as she fought back tears. That was the moment I promised myself that I would never let my son see my mother Carol again. After leaving Grandma's place, I went to a local Denny's for dinner. On the way there, Mason was quietly sobbing and asking, "Dad, is great-grandmother mad at me?" Every question he asked seemed like a stab in my heart. Sophie had to calm him down by talking about the delicious cuisine he could get at Denny's. She said, "Do you want pancakes with maple syrup? Or maybe some crispy fried chicken? They even have cotton candy." Mason instantly perked up. His eyes lighted up when he heard about the cotton candy. He clasped his hands and said, "I want pancakes and cotton candy." I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly he recovered. That's the thing about kids. One moment they're bawling their eyes out, and the next they're smiling like if nothing happened. Looking in the rearview mirror, I noticed Mason had stopped weeping. Now he was full of food-related questions. Sophie looked over at me, her eyes apprehensive but yet relieved. Seeing our son happy again gave her some peace. When we pulled into the Denny's parking lot, I looked at the card and the box of cookies that was still on the back seat. I had lingering regrets and doubts about what had recently happened. Knowing how strict my grandma can be, it would not be out of character for her to refuse someone admittance simply because they were late. But the fact that my mother delivered the message made me mistrust everything. My phone unexpectedly rang as we were ready to enter Denny's. When I saw the name Grandma Helen on the screen, I hesitated for a second before going silent. I didn't want to talk to anyone right then, especially given what had transpired. Sophie glanced at me kindly as the phone rang again, saying, "You should pick up. Maybe something's wrong." I answered the phone while she was still speaking. Grandma's voice came through the speaker, full of concern. "Daniel, is everything okay? Why haven't you all arrived yet?" Her question caught me completely off guard. I promptly asked, "Didn't you tell my mom to send us away because we were late?" There was a slight pause. Then Grandma responded, visibly astonished. "I never said that." My brain exploded. So, my mother had lied. Grandma hadn't told her to send us away. Anger and hurt flooded over me. I couldn't believe my mother could be so harsh, not just turning us away, but also accusing Grandma of covering it up. After a period of stillness, Grandma spoke again with a harsh tone. "Come back. I'll get to the bottom of this." I let out a slow breath and responded, "I don't think making a big deal out of this is necessary. I'll stop by to see you another time." Suddenly, Grandma shouted, something I'd never heard from her before. "Come back right now!" I was stunned. I had never heard her so irate or commanding. Grandma Helen, who had always talked to me softly and lovingly, was now speaking with firmness and wrath. Her voice rendered me stunned. 30 seconds of silence passed. Then her voice came through again, calmer but still determined. "I'm sorry for raising my voice. Please bring your family back. I'll be waiting." Her genuine apologies destroyed something within me. Grandma was always the only person in the family who understood and actually loved me. If she asked, I couldn't refuse. In a hushed voice, I said, "We'll come back right away." Sophie, who had overheard the entire conversation, looked at me with understanding. She nodded and said, "Hey, let's go back." Mason stood in front of the restaurant, unsure what was going on. When he noticed us walking back to the car, he asked, "Mom, Dad, aren't we eating here anymore?" I softly touched his hair and murmured, "We're going to see Grandma Helen now." Mason sprang with delight as soon as I said it. "Dad, then let's go. Hurry." After that, we jumped in the car and drove as fast as we could back to Grandma's house. 10 minutes later, we were back in front of Grandma's house. This time, she was already outside, waiting for us. Some distant aunts and uncles, as well as my parents and Nathan and his family, stood behind her. The scene before me was surprising. Everyone was standing outside on the porch in the cold Christmas night air. In the frigid temperatures, their breath formed little clouds. Grandma stood in the center with a stern scowl, while my folks stood off to the side, visibly annoyed. Nathan, my younger brother, became irritated as soon as we got out of the car. "Because of your family, Grandma and all of us had to wait out here in the cold." Before I could react, Grandma Helen yelled in a voice I'd never heard from her before. "Shut up!" Her voice rang across the calm night air. Nathan froze, startled to silence. He didn't say another thing. The other relatives were also quiet. Nobody dared to speak. Then Grandma came over to us. Her expression relaxed. She hugged Sophie and me, then went down to gently take Mason's hand. She spoke softly to him. "Great-grandmother has been waiting a long time for you." Mason smiled at her kindness, still clutching the card securely. As we entered the house, I passed my mother. I looked over and noticed her face pallid, her gaze avoiding mine. Sophie, who was strolling beside me, could sense the strain as well. She squeezed my hand tightly, as if to give me strength. When we walked into the living room, I noticed everything had been nicely decorated for Christmas. A large tree stood in the corner, adorned with glittering decorations and twinkling lights. The table was piled high with wonderful food awaiting service, and the fireplace crackled softly, casting a comfortable warmth around the room. Everything was ideal for a Christmas gathering, except for the oppressive tension in the air. Grandma stood in the center of the room, her expression as serious as I had ever seen. In a strong and firm voice, she said, "Before we continue with this celebration, some things need to be addressed." The room fell completely silent. Nobody dared to cough or even shift. Relatives gathered along the walls. Nathan and his wife stood by Adrian, while my parents hovered in the back as if they were trying to disappear. Suddenly, Grandma turned to my mother and yelled with clear authority, "Carol, is there anything you'd like to say to me or to Daniel and his family?" Everyone in the room looked at my mother. She didn't say anything, just stood there, pale as a sheet, hands trembling, unable to meet anyone's eyes. When she didn't speak, Grandma resumed, her tone stronger now. "This is my house, not yours. Who gave you the right to send Daniel and his family away?" That question landed like a slap. My mother sputtered, attempting to defend herself. I didn't. Daniel is lying. I didn't send anyone away." Grandma cut in with a voice that could freeze water as she continued to deny everything and tried to blame me. "Enough." Then she turned to Uncle Bruce, a longtime neighbor who frequently assisted her with household repairs. She called out, "Bruce, pull up the footage from the front door." Uncle Bruce removed the tablet from Grandma's grasp without hesitation. He was knowledgeable about technology and frequently assisted her in setting up and using electronic gadgets. He accessed the security camera software with swift, practiced fingers and located the footage from the moment we arrived. The room was so quiet that you could hear the wall clock ticking. Mason stood alongside me, still holding his card, perplexed by everything. Sophie gripped my hand tightly, Both of us tensed as we waited. A few seconds later, the familiar voice came through the tablet speaker, loud and clear. "Go home. There's no room left." My parents froze. Their features became pallid, their gaze fixed on the tablet as if it were a monster. Then the second sentence arrived, much colder and more cutting. "Helen told me if you showed up late, I had to send you away." My mother's voice was unmistakable, flat, lifeless, and nasty. I looked around. My parents' and Nathan's family's reactions were similar to those of people who had been caught in the act. Nathan lowered his head, reluctant to look anyone in the eyes. His wife hugged Adrian closely, hiding him from what was happening. My father, Robert, stood still, his face devoid of any color. My mother was trembling so intensely that it appeared she could collapse. Whispers started to spread throughout the room. Relatives began talking to each other, throwing disapproving glances at my parents. No one could believe Carol, who they had always thought was kind, could be so harsh to her grandson. After the entire audience had heard everything, Uncle Bruce turned off the video and set the tablet down. His expression, too, betrayed silent displeasure at what had just been disclosed. The air surrounding me felt heavy and tense, making it difficult to breathe. But within, I felt relief, which I hadn't felt all evening. I felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The truth had finally been revealed. A little while later, the room began to vibrate with noise. The guests began speaking up, openly criticizing my mother. Janet, my father's cousin, shakes her head and says, "Carol, I never thought you could do something like this." From the corner of the room, Uncle Mike, another cousin of my father, added, "This is too much. Christmas is about family being together. No one with a heart would kick their son and grandson out of a celebration. Even animals have more compassion than you, Carol." The voices of disapproval spread quickly. Whispers turned into loud comments. My mother stood there in complete isolation. No one spoke in her defense. 2 minutes later, Grandma raised her hand and the entire room fell silent. Her authority in the family was absolute. Nobody dared to disobey her gestures. Then, with a chilly voice, she declared, "From this moment forward, I no longer have a son named Robert, and I have no daughter-in-law named Carol." The words hit the room like a flash of lightning. My father, Robert, screamed out in a panicked tone, "Mom, you can't do this!" My mother broke down in tears, screaming and pleading, "I know I was wrong. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it." But Grandma had made up her mind. Her face was as hard as stone, unmoved and resolute. She had suffered injustice in our family for far too long. Before they could speak again, she shouted loudly and clearly, with a final tone, "You have 30 days to leave the house you're living in. The estate in Highlands Ranch will be passed on to Daniel and his family. Tomorrow morning, I'll begin transferring ownership, and a formal eviction notice will be issued." They stood there in shock. My parents' house was officially Grandma's, and the Highlands Ranch estate, one of her most valuable holdings, was now being passed down to us. My father stammered, and his voice trembled. "You can't do this. I'm your son." Grandma stared him dead in the eye and stated, her voice full of disappointment, "You stopped being my son when you favored Nathan over Daniel. Now leave." Her remarks had a definitive impact. Robert and Carol remained transfixed like statues, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Moments later, they turned and walked out discreetly, heads down, reluctant to catch anyone's eye. After my parents went, Nathan, my younger brother, stayed behind. He looked at Grandma, his voice stiff with fear, and asked, "What about me? I'm your grandson too." His question caught everyone off guard. Grandma looked at him with chilly eyes and an unreadable attitude. She answered simply, "You won't have a share. You saw your parents mistreat Daniel and said nothing. You even took pride in it. Don't think I didn't notice." Nathan attempted to defend himself. "But Grandma, I didn't get involved in what Mom and Dad did. Grandma lifted her hand, stopping him before he could finish. Then she said, "You stayed silent in the face of injustice and benefited from it. That makes you complicit." Nathan's face flushed in irritation as he heard this. He took his wife's hand and reached for Adrian. He spoke through clenched teeth. "Fine. If that's how it is, we're leaving." Before stepping out, Nathan turned to face me, his eyes filled with bitterness. He shouted, "Are you happy now, Daniel? You've torn this whole family apart." I stood quietly. I did not respond. Deep down, I didn't feel proud or triumphant. All I felt was deep, quiet sadness for everything that had been lost. Nathan stormed out, bringing his wife and son with him. Adrian, formerly the favored grandson, now resembled a bewildered youngster, entirely adrift in a position he couldn't comprehend. As the door closed again, the room went silent. The remaining family gazed at me with compassion, as if they had just witnessed the end of an era. At that point, I realized what was ahead, the aftermath and implications of Grandma's decision. After they went, Grandma asked that the party continue. She clapped her hands quietly and told everyone, "Let's enjoy this Christmas night. This is a time for real families to be together." The vibe in the room slowly reverted to normal. The remaining relatives did their best to ignore what had transpired and concentrate on the celebration. Laughter and talk gradually returned, though first stiff. Mason had been waiting for this moment all week. He hurried over to great-grandmother, holding the card in his hands. Shyly, he raised it and said, "Great-grandmother, this is the Christmas gift I made for you." Grandma took the card right away, her eyes lighting up as she saw the adorable illustrations. She hugged Mason tightly and remarked in a friendly tone, "Thank you, sweetheart. I will frame this card and hang it on the living room wall for everyone to see." Mason grinned from ear to ear, delighted that his present had been appreciated. Later, my wife brought out the cookies she had baked that morning for everyone to enjoy. The chocolate chip cookies were delicately adorned with multicolored candy pieces. Our family and neighbors could not cease admiring them. Janet said, "Sophie, these cookies are amazing. Can you share the recipe?" Uncle Bruce nodded. "Yes, they remind me of my childhood." Grandma helped slice and serve the cookies, and her face was brighter than it had been in a long time. It felt as if a big burden had been lifted from her shoulders as she watched everyone have fun. I softly thanked Grandma for what she had done for our family. We spent the night at Grandma's place because it was late and snow was falling. Mason slept with great-grandmother, while Sophie and I remained in the living room. I slept better than I had in years, as if I had finally escaped a nightmare that had lasted much too long. I assumed Grandma was angry when she disowned my father and cut him off from his fortune, but she was not joking. At 8:00 a.m. the next morning, after we had breakfast, toast, and homemade sunny-side-up eggs, Grandma summoned her lawyer, Christian, to the house. He had been her attorney for many years, a well-dressed man in his 60s with silver hair and a calm professional demeanor. When Mr. Christian arrived, Grandma sat at the dining table to go over the legal processes. Sophie and I sat nearby as Mason played with the toys that Grandma had set out for him. Grandma gave the lawyer permission to begin the process of transferring ownership of two properties. The two-story house in Lakewood, where my parents had been living, a property she had purchased for them 10 years before, and the estate in Highlands Ranch, which she now intended to pass down to me and my wife. Combined, those two properties were worth nearly $2 million. Mr. Christian took detailed notes on every element of her instructions for the legal documents. She also instructed him to submit an official notice asking that my parents leave the Lakewood house within 30 days. Mr. Christian nodded and responded, "I'll prepare everything and send the formal documents later today." In that moment, I felt profound gratitude to Grandma, not for the money or the property, but for the fairness and justice she had delivered to our family. After the lawyer left, I jumped up, hugged her tightly, and remarked in an emotional voice, "Thank you, Grandma. I don't know what else to say." She softly patted my back and smiled. "I'm just doing what's right." Before we returned to our home, she hugged Mason firmly and told us, "Next time you visit, make sure to bake more cookies for me to give to the neighbors." They loved Sophie's cookies. Her simple suggestion made Sophie and me laugh. I informed her, "If you want, we can bake cookies daily and bring them to you." As we drove away from her house, I peeked in the rearview mirror and saw her waving farewell on the porch. And at that moment, I realized our lives had begun a new chapter. I assumed my parents would quietly leave after what transpired at Grandma's place. However, they didn't. Instead of accepting the consequences of their conduct, they retaliated recklessly. When they received the eviction notice from Christian, Grandma's attorney, they went to her house to demand explanations. Perhaps they hoped they could persuade her to change her mind, or at least make her feel guilty. After they had left, Grandma called me. Her voice seemed fatigued. She said, "Daniel, I need to let you know. Your parents came by and caused a scene. You should be careful. They might show up at your house too." Her account provided me with additional information about what occurred. My father had demanded that she return everything. My mother sobbed, claiming Grandma was pulling the family apart, but Grandma remained steadfast. Finally, she threatened to contact the police before they departed. And, exactly as she had said, when I arrived home from work that afternoon, my parents and Nathan's family were standing in front of my Thornton home. I'd barely parked into the garage when I noticed their angry faces at my front door. As I went outside, Nathan approached, his face flushed with wrath. He pointed at me and said furiously, "You'll choke on that mansion, Daniel." My mother stood by him, her eyes red with tears, yet her speech was full with hatred. "I regret ever giving birth to you." That sentence, coming from my mother, stunned me. I stood motionless for a minute, but I held my ground. I refused to allow my emotions take over. Seconds after, my father stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. "If you still want us to consider you family, you'd better give up some of what Grandma gave you." They shouted and cursed at me for about 2 minutes. Neighbors started peering through their windows, intrigued by the disturbance. Instead of shouting or attempting to reason with them, I quietly took out my phone and contacted 911. When the wire was connected, I stated explicitly, "Hi, there are individuals outside my home threatening me." My father roared when he heard that. "You're calling the cops on your father?" I stared him directly in the eyes and responded coldly, "Are you confused? I don't know who you are." That phrase struck him like a slap. He stood there, speechless and flushed with wrath. Even Nathan appeared stunned. He had not expecting me to stand up like that. A little later, Nathan's wife tugged on his sleeve, saying, "Let's go. The police will be here any minute." They hesitantly left, not wanting to risk being imprisoned for harassment. My parents entered their automobile, their faces full with wrath. Nathan gave me one final glance, full of contempt, before driving away. 2 officers came around 15 minutes later. I brought them inside and explained everything from start to finish. I also showed them footage from our security camera that clearly demonstrated the threats. Officer Johnson, an experienced middle-aged man, took copious notes. He inquired, "Would you like to file an official report?" Without hesitation, I nodded and told him, "Yes, I want this documented so I can apply for a restraining order. I'm worried they'll keep harassing my family." Only 1 week later, my parents and Nathan's family received a formal notice from the court. They were legally barred from contacting my family for the next 3 years. No visits, phone calls, or emails. No interaction in any way. When I received a copy of the court order, I felt a sense of relief. Finally, my tiny family was safe from the people who had brought us so much anguish. My parents moved out of the house precisely 30 days after getting Christian's notice. That afternoon, I drove over to check on the place, and it was empty. They had left some old furniture and stains on the walls, but at least they had followed the court order. We did not move in. The mansion in Lakewood, while lovely, contained far too many terrible memories of the old family. Instead, I hired professionals to thoroughly rebuild it, including new paint, carpeting, and repairs throughout. Once the work was completed, I rented it to a family of 6 for $2,000 per month. We did not move into the Highlands Ranch estate that Grandma had given us. Sophie and I decided to stay in the Thornton home we bought together, one we built from the ground up and packed with memories. That was our real home. The estate had deteriorated over time due to a lack of sufficient maintenance. I spent approximately $150,000 to totally restore it, including replacing the plumbing and electrical systems, laying hardwood floors, modernizing the kitchen, and planting the garden. After refurbishing, I gave it over to Premium Property Management to maintain and lease. Depending on the rental agreement, I now get $6,000 to $10,000 per month from it. However, I did not waste that money on frivolous purchases. During the first month, we went to visit Grandma, and I tried to give her all of the rental revenue. She shook her head and politely refused. "Keep it. That's the return on something I chose to give you. Use it to invest in Mason's future." Her remarks moved me greatly. I nodded in agreement. I opened a separate savings account for Mason and deposited the majority of his rental income. After everything we'd been through, I felt extremely fortunate to have Grandma in my life, not only because she gifted us these properties, but also because she taught me the true value of fairness and genuine love. It's been over a year since that awful Christmas night. Life has changed in ways I never expected. My parents are now residing in another location, Phoenix, Arizona, and rely on their retirement benefits. The large house and all of the amenities that Grandma had offered them for many years are no longer there. According to distant relatives, they live in a small apartment and rely on their monthly Social Security checks to get by. Nathan has not communicated with me since that day. He and his family relocated to Texas to start over. Adrian, once the golden grandson, is now a distant memory of the past. When I initially thought of the broken family, I felt a little melancholy. Childhood memories, especially those shaped by partiality, remained part of me. But gradually, I realized that my life should center solely around my wife, my kid Mason, and my grandmother. We pay regular visits to Grandma on weekends. She is now 80 years old, with whiter hair and slower steps, but her mind remains sharp and her spirit happy. Mason always looks forward to seeing his great-grandmother, who adores him. I hope Grandma stays with us for many more years, so Mason will have even more memories with this amazing woman. Life is full of joy these days, especially since we're going to receive a new little angel. Sophie is 8 months pregnant, her tummy round and gorgeous, and Mason can't stop chatting to the baby inside. He frequently remarks, "Hey baby, I'll teach you how to play Legos and how to draw." At night, I consider myself fortunate to be wrapped up on the sofa watching a movie, Sophie putting her head on my shoulder and Mason sleeping in my lap. This is the bliss I've been seeking for all these years. Today, I offer my tale not to brag about my current situation, but so that anyone who has ever been mistreated, disregarded, or injured by their own family understands they are not alone. Most critically, they have the right to protect themselves. Never accept injustice simply because it comes from kin. Your kids deserve to be loved equally. Set boundaries if you tried to speak up, but no one listened. Distancing oneself from poisonous people, especially if they are blood relatives, might sometimes be the best way to defend your house. You don't owe somebody the right to hurt you simply because they have your DNA. And only one day ago, I received a call from a distant relative. My parents currently live in Phoenix near him. He called to reprimand me. He said that I was the reason our family came apart. Do you think I'm the cause my family split up? My sister-in-law mocked my pregnancy, demanded my twin names, and tried to use them first. But I clapped back in a way she never saw coming. I'm Leah, 32, and I've been married to Jack, 34, for 4 years. We have a 3-year-old son and are currently expecting twins, a boy and a girl. This situation includes Jack's sister-in-law, Miranda, 36, who is married to his brother, Tony, 40. They've been married for 7 years. Miranda and I are extreme opposites. She is outspoken, the center of attention at family events, and has strong opinions on everything. I prefer to be quiet and observe people. When Jack first introduced me to his family, I informed him that Miranda and I would never be close friends. We've had a cordial but distant friendship ever since. The trouble began 3 years ago with my first pregnancy. Miranda and Tony have tried to have children for years without success. When someone mentioned my pregnancy at family dinners, Miranda would either change the conversation or make comments about how pregnancy was not that unique because millions of women go through it every day. Then she'd spend significant periods of time in the restroom. Miranda unexpectedly offered to plan my baby shower around the middle of my pregnancy. I gently declined, stating that my mother and sister had already covered it. She persisted for weeks until I had to be more honest about not wanting her involved. The oddest behavior began after we revealed that we were having a son. Miranda got preoccupied with learning what we wanted to name him. Every family gathering, phone conversation, and text message, she would inquire about the name. When I told her we weren't going to share it till birth, she got obviously angry and commented on how secretive we were. Jack and I chose a traditional Irish name that was uncommon in our area. Miranda couldn't stop gushing about how unique and beautiful our son's name was once we revealed it. She'd bring it up at every opportunity, telling everyone how she'd never heard a more wonderful name before. This continued for months. Fast forward to this year. Miranda finally became pregnant about the same time that I conceived the twins. She was approximately 9 weeks ahead of me. When we announced we were having twins, she resumed the name questioning, but this time she wanted both names because we were having one of each. Her remarks grew increasingly offensive. She'd make comments about how with twins, I'd probably gain twice as much weight and never recover. When someone congratulated us at a family cookout, she loudly proclaimed that we had clearly gotten pregnant on purpose just to steal her thunder. Everyone knew we had been trying for a second kid for more than a year. I opted to ignore her comments entirely. Miranda loves on drama and arguments, so I felt the best way to irritate her was to offer her no response at all. After weeks of her repeatedly asking about the twin names, I became skeptical. I asked Jack whether he believed Miranda wanted to know our names so she could use them first, given she was due earlier. He chuckled at first, but soon understood I was serious. After some thought, he admitted that it was plausible. I then decided to put my notion to the test. Jack's father was celebrating his 61st birthday at our place the following weekend. We had been steadily putting together a nursery for the twins in our spare bedroom, but it wasn't ready yet. I devised a strategy to leave false identities somewhere Miranda may discover them if she went digging. I went online and created custom wall decals with two names that I liked but were not near to our final choices: Rose Arwin and Luke Max. I completed the entire ordering process but stopped just before completing payment. Instead, I printed the final order confirmation sheet, which included both names plainly. The night before the party, I folded the paper and put it inside the nursery dresser's middle drawer, giving the impression that it had been haphazardly shoved in there. I made sure one corner stood out just enough to be noticed if the drawer was opened. Jack thought my scheme was absurd, but he agreed to a $23 bet that Miranda would not snoop. We were busy hosting the party at our place, so we didn't pay attention to Miranda's movements throughout the evening. The next morning, I checked on the nursery. Everything looked the same. The paper was still in the drawer, exactly where I'd left it. Jack and I assumed the test had failed and forgot about it. But then I realized something intriguing. Miranda ceased inquiring about our baby names after the party. For someone who had been bothering us every day for weeks, the sudden silence seemed strange. Miranda gave birth to her baby 4 weeks later. Jack and I visited the hospital to greet our baby nephew. When I asked Miranda what the baby's name was, she smiled and said, Luke Max. She stared directly at me when she said it, as if she was expecting a great reaction. Instead of appearing offended, I became overly enthusiastic. I raved about how beautiful the name was, how perfect it sounded, and how fortunate they were to choose such a lovely combination. I continued for a full minute as Miranda's attitude shifted from smug enjoyment to uncertainty to apparent frustration. Jack tried not to laugh alongside me. Later, in the elevator, he gave me $23 while shaking his head. We didn't see Miranda and Tony for a few weeks, giving them time with their new kid. Miranda, according to Jack's mother, appeared to be struggling more than expected with new parenthood, probably due to baby blues. When I informed my sister about the event, she laughed at first, but then thought I was being harsh by setting Miranda up like way. I can't decide whether what I did was wrong. Miranda was making my pregnancy difficult with her continuous demands and harsh comments. The phony names weren't even names I wanted to use someday, but perhaps I went too far with the trap. Should I feel horrible about it? Update 1. The issue with Miranda has become more difficult than I had anticipated. First, let me explain why Miranda and I never got along. The problem began when Jack and I became engaged after only 9 months of dating. Miranda told family members that I was hurrying Jack into marriage and had possibly ensnared him in some way. When Jack's grandma mentioned how excited she was to have another granddaughter, Miranda made a point of adding she hoped Jack was certain of his decision. Our wedding made everything worse. Jack and I had a typical church service for 151 guests, followed by a reception at a country club. We went on an 11-day honeymoon in Ireland. Meanwhile, Miranda and Tony had married at City Hall in front of only their immediate family, followed by dinner at a chain restaurant. Tony proposed after Miranda gave him an ultimatum concerning marriage, which the entire family was aware of. Miranda also battled with the fact that Jack's family welcomed me right away. His parents and I share similar hobbies and characteristics. His grandmother, who everyone refers to as Nana, immediately began engaging me in her weekly shopping excursions and Sunday dinners. Miranda and Tony had been together for 4 years before their wedding, but Nana had never warmed up to her in the same manner. The contrast became even more stark after Jack and I purchased our suburban home 3 years ago. Miranda and Tony continue to rent a small flat in the city because they cannot afford to buy property in their neighborhood. Jack and I both have steady corporate jobs with nice benefits, whereas Miranda and Tony work in retail with uncertain hours. Miranda had too much to drink at Tony's birthday party approximately a year ago and got into a fight with him over money. In front of everyone, she stated that she should have married Jack rather than Tony because Jack had his life together. The entire household went silent. I was not even surprised. I assumed Miranda had affections for Jack for years based on how she behaved around him. I answered by asking whose brother she was referring to, which would be incorrect anyhow, given that Jack and Tony have a younger brother, Neo, who is just 26 years old. Miranda lost her cool entirely and began yelling at me for twisting her words. She said the next day that she did not recall saying anything wrong. Now for the latest update. Jack's mother came over yesterday to discuss arrangements for my baby shower next month. I'm due in late January, but twins usually arrive early, so we're prepping for December. While she was here, I asked how Miranda and Tony were adjusting to parenting. Jack's mother sat down with a heavy sigh, saying it was complicated. Miranda and Tony, she claims, were battling about baby names even before the kid was born. Miranda had spent months compiling lists of female names, but refused to consider male names. When Tony inquired, Miranda asserted that the baby was certainly a female. If it was a boy, she intended to give him the name Tony Jr. This sparked a heated disagreement because Tony's older son from a prior relationship is not named after him. The youngster lives with his mother in another state and visits her twice a year. Tony believed that naming the new baby Jr. would be unfair to his first son. Miranda, according to Jack's mother, convinced herself she was having a daughter because she wanted one so much. Miranda refused to find out the gender while pregnant for fear of being disappointed. She insisted on enjoying her pregnancy, believing she was bearing a girl. Miranda's yearning for a girl grew stronger as a result of her family relationships. Jack's mother is the only daughter in a family of 3 brothers, and she has 3 sons herself. My son was her first grandchild, yet my daughter would be her first granddaughter in decades. Jack's mother burst into tears of joy when we announced we were carrying a girl. Jack's mother has always been nice to Miranda, but they have never bonded. She is smitten with my little son in the sweetest way. Every week, they organize activities for grandmothers and grandsons. Miranda observed this bond develop and grew persuaded that having a daughter would finally cause Jack's mother to love her in the same manner. When Miranda gave birth to another grandson instead of the granddaughter she had hoped for, something changed in her thoughts. The hospital scene was considerably messier than I expected. Miranda and Tony were still debating over names when Jack and I arrived. Miranda had never mentioned Luke Max to Tony until that point. Tony was stunned and indignant when she told us what had happened. He had no idea where those names came from and disliked them completely. Tony refused to sign the birth certificate bearing such names. They left the hospital without providing a name for the infant. According to state legislation, parents have 11 days after the birth to register a name. Miranda ultimately told Tony that he could do anything he wanted since she didn't care anymore. Tony chose Bruce Rocky. Bruce is named after his favorite basketball player, while Rocky is named after a boxer. He preserved the Rocky from Miranda's announced name, but otherwise modified everything. So, the infant was never given the name Luke Max. Miranda's attempt to utilize my fictitious names lasted precisely as long as it took Tony to put his foot down. Miranda, according to Jack's mother, has become withdrawn since returning home from the hospital. She meets the baby's basic requirements but appears distant from anything else. She broke down crying in front of Jack's mother last week, stating she'll probably never have a daughter due to her age and their previous fertility issues. Despite everything Miranda has put me through, I now feel awful for her. Having a healthy baby should be enough. But I understand feeling disappointed after months of building up expectations. The irony is that Miranda's breakdown may bring her closer to Jack's mother, as they now share the experience of only having sons while desperately wanting daughters. Miranda still has no idea I set her up with the fictitious names, and I haven't notified anyone in the family about my scheme. Some may argue that I should confess, but I don't see the point in exacerbating her current situation. I'm not regretful about what I did. Miranda made my pregnancy uncomfortable with her incessant demands and rude comments, but I'm also not cruel enough to kick someone who is already down. Update 2. Miranda discovered my name trap, and the consequences have been far worse than I anticipated. I gave birth to twins in early January, Rose and Frodo Jack. Yes, Rose was one of my fictitious names, but it was also on our list for females long before the trap. Pure coincidence, which resulted in further trouble later. Both babies are healthy, and we're adjusting well to having 3 children under 3 years old. Jack took 2 weeks off work to help, and his mother has been coming over every day to help with the elder children. The difficulty began when Jack's mother was carrying Rose and noted how lovely her name was. She stated she had seen it recently but couldn't remember where. I made a general statement about it being a common name. That evening, Jack's mother called me. She recalls seeing the name Rose written on a piece of paper in our nursery dresser drawer the night of Jack's father's birthday party. She explained that she was searching for baby wipes at the party when one of the children had an accident. I informed her that there were supplies in the nursery dresser. When she opened the drawer, she noticed the corner of a paper peeking out and tugged it to push it down properly. She had glanced at it and seen both names, Rose Arwen and Luke Max. Jack's mother assumed those were our chosen names and didn't think much of it at the time. But when Miranda introduced Luke Max at the hospital, Jack's mother recognized Miranda had read the same newspaper elsewhere. Miranda had snooped in our nursery, discovered what she believed to be our genuine names, and attempted to use one of them first. Jack's mother was furious that Miranda had gone through our personal belongings and that I felt the need to build a trap. I decided to give her the entire truth about my concerns and the phony name arrangement. Jack's mother was not pleased with the deception, but she understood why I had done it. She was angrier about Miranda's probing than my trap. The trouble arose when Jack's mother could not keep the story to herself. She told Jack's father, who notified Tony during a phone call about something else altogether. Tony confronted Miranda, who initially denied everything but later admitted to looking through our dresser drawers. According to Tony, Miranda broke down totally when she discovered we had duped her. She stated that she had planned to use any term she could find to hurt me and make herself feel better about her own disappointments. She'd spent months resenting my pregnancy and wishing to ruin something for me in the same way that her reproductive issues had ruined everything for her. Tony was upset, not only because of the spying, but also because Miranda admitted that she tried to name their son specifically to hurt me. He informed her that she needed to apologize to both Jack and me immediately. Miranda declined. She claimed I had humiliated her by setting her up, and she refused to apologize for anything. She said that I was manipulative and had turned the entire family against her. This resulted in a massive brawl between Miranda and Tony. He pointed out that she had brought all of this upon herself by searching through our personal items and attempting to take our baby names out of spite. Miranda accused him of choosing my side over his own wife's. The disagreement heated up when Tony said that he had never liked the name Luke Max and was relieved they had ended up with Bruce Rocky instead. Miranda screamed that she despised the name Bruce Rocky and wished she hadn't had a baby at all if it wasn't going to be female. Tony moved out that night and has been residing with Jack's folks for the last 3 weeks. He has been caring for baby Bruce throughout the day while Miranda works, and then returning him to her at night. They barely talk to each other. Jack's mother is stuck in the middle, trying to help with both grandsons while Tony and Miranda work out their marriage. She is disturbed about the situation and concerned that all of the strain would impact baby Bruce. Miranda has been telling everybody who will listen that I am a bad person who ruined her marriage via my scheming. She has convinced some of Tony's coworkers and extended family members that I am manipulative and harsh. Jack is unhappy with his brother and Miranda for involving our newborn babies in their turmoil. He wants to cut all touch with them until they resolve their issues. I'm inclined to agree, but Jack's mother begs us not to exacerbate the situation by further dividing the family. I wasn't expecting my small test to reveal this level of dysfunction in Miranda and Tony's relationship. I only wanted to confirm my thoughts about the name theft. There is now a baby caught between two parents who are unable to be in the same room. Part of me feels bad for starting this series of events, but a larger part of me believes Miranda's behavior was bound to produce difficulties soon. I simply happened to be the catalyst that brought everything to light. Update 3. Miranda and Tony separated, and she has vanished from our lives entirely. The divorce process progressed fast because they had only been married for 6 years and did not own much jointly. Tony maintained their apartment lease and furniture. Miranda moved back in with her parents in another city around 2 hours away. The custody arrangement for infant Bruce became the most serious concern. Miranda first wanted full custody, stating Tony's work schedule was too unpredictable for him to be a responsible parent. Tony responded by bringing up Miranda's remark that she wished she hadn't had the baby. Jack's mother ended up testifying about Miranda's behavior during the name dispute, including her admission that she tried to intentionally damage me. The judge was unimpressed by someone who would use their baby's name as a weapon against family members. Tony received primary custody, with Miranda receiving supervised visits every other weekend. She has to drive to our city for the visits since the judge does not want baby Bruce to travel back and forth all the time. Jack's parents oversaw the visits in their home. Miranda attended her planned visits and obeyed the regulations for the first month, but she appeared distant from Bruce, frequently passing him off to Jack's mother while she sat on her phone or watched television. Miranda began missing visits. First one, then two in a sequence, followed by months without touch. She stopped returning Tony's calls to schedule makeup appointments. When Jack's mother attempted to contact Miranda, her phone went directly to voicemail. We discovered on social media that Miranda had been dating someone new, a man she had supposedly met at work before returning to live with her parents. Her Instagram photos showed them traveling together, going to restaurants, and generally living like a childless couple in their 20s. Tony was devastated. Despite everything that had transpired, he hoped Miranda would stand up as Bruce's mother. He'd been suffering with his own guilt about their marriage's dissolution, wondering if he could have handled things differently. Jack's mother stepped in to help Tony with childcare while he worked. She basically became Bruce's primary caretaker during the day, which worked out perfectly because she already looked after my 3 children on a daily basis. The cousins are growing up together, which benefits everyone involved. Miranda made one farewell appearance at a family gathering to celebrate Jack's grandmother's 80th birthday last month. She arrived unexpectedly with her new partner, presumably expecting to be welcomed back as if nothing had occurred. The mood became tight instantly. Miranda's boyfriend was uneasy when he realized he'd entered into a family scenario. Miranda tried to act normal, asking to hold Bruce and commenting on how much he had grown. Tony returned Bruce after a few minutes and informed Miranda that she wasn't supposed to be there outside of scheduled visits. Miranda claimed she was family and had every right to attend family gatherings. Jack's father finally stood up, telling Miranda that she had lost the right to appear up unannounced after months of ignoring her son and bad-mouthing family members. He asked her and her partner to leave. Miranda burst into tears, claiming that everyone had turned against her for something she had done nothing to deserve. She claimed that I had ruined her life through manipulation and that no one cared about her side of the story. I had remained quiet throughout the confrontation, but that comment prompted me to speak up. I informed Miranda that digging through my personal belongings and attempting to steal my baby's name out of spite was her decision, not mine. I told her that she was responsible for every problem in her life and that she should quit blaming others for her actions. Miranda called me names I won't say here and said she wished I'd be unhappy for the rest of my life. Her partner was mortified and began pushing her toward the door. They left as she continued to hurl allegations at various family members. That was 2 months ago. Miranda hasn't contacted anyone from her family since then. Tony found out through mutual friends that she and her lover had moved out of state together. She allegedly told people that her ex-husband's family prevented her from seeing her son, which is absolutely false but simpler than admitting she picked her current relationship above her child. Tony's been doing well as a single father. Bruce is a cheerful, healthy baby who lights up whenever he sees his father or grandparents. Tony recently began dating someone new, a woman who works for his company and has 2 children from a previous marriage. She appears to understand his circumstances and gets along well with Bruce. As for me, I have no regrets about creating the name trap. Miranda's reaction to being caught exposed her true personality. Someone who would abandon their child because they couldn't take being exposed for their petty, spiteful actions was never going to be a decent mother. My twins are prospering, and my elder son enjoys being a big brother. Jack and I are tired yet thrilled with our 3 children. Despite everything, Jack's bond with Tony has grown stronger. They now communicate regularly and support each other as fathers. Family gatherings are much more serene without Miranda's drama and nastiness. Jack's mother may focus on being a grandma rather than dealing with Miranda's emotional outbursts. Even Jack's father, who normally keeps out of family disputes, has remarked on how much more calm everyone appears. People sometimes ask me if I'm unhappy with how things turned out. The reality is, I did not cause Miranda to abandon her child or end her marriage. I simply created a situation that revealed her actual character. She could have accepted being caught gracefully, apologized for snooping, and gone on with her life. Instead, she chose to destroy every relationship she had rather than accept responsibility for her actions. Bruce is better off without a mother who despised his existence from the day he was born. Tony is better off without his wife, who married him as a consolation prize and spent years wishing she had picked someone else. The entire family is better off without someone who adds drama and negativity to every gathering. My name trap worked better than I expected. I figured I'd catch Miranda being inquisitive and embarrass her a little. Instead, I unintentionally helped a baby escape a terrible mother and Tony leave a poisonous marriage. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is provide them with enough rope to hang themselves.